Are you also feeling nostalgic for an alternative reality that isn't happening? Because same.
Welcome to the College of Valor, where we empower truth seekers with the art of reason. Hope is the motivation, truth is the goal. Everyday valor is the practice, better living is the result. I love that. Hi, everyone. I'm Kurt.
And I'm Lydia. Welcome back to College of Valor.
Yeah, today's show is going to be okay. I try to avoid this, but today I don't think we're going to. It's going to be pretty introspective. And people may laugh because they think, well, you're always being introspective. No, but I mean real. This is like meta. So, but I think we're going to explore some things together that might at least let people know that they're not alone in these experiences.
Absolutely.
I don't know if
Yep.
we have all the right answers for this one, but I think it's worth discussing. So, say that line again, Lydia.
I was just telling my brother, because he's feeling the same way that I am today, that I was feeling nostalgic for an alternative reality that isn't happening. And I think that a lot of people can relate to that. It's part of the human condition. That's where all of the sayings originate of the grass is greener on the other side of the fence and things like that. But in reality, sometimes we just feel like we're not necessarily in the right spot of where we would like to be, or we feel like we should be someplace else, which kind of feeds into what we're talking about today, which is the ideal self, the person that you think that you should be, the ideal version of you versus the real self or your self image, what you actually are and how you're perceived by other people, and the raw unfiltered version of you. And it was really funny because as I was thinking about all of this, I had no idea that this was actually an idea that originated with Carl Rogers, the psychologist, and he kind of adopted it from Maslow's hierarchy. And so that was just so interesting to me that I was pondering this real self versus ideal self. And then I looked into it a little bit more. I just hit a Google search and then I found out, oh, there's actually a lot of research on this, and a lot of people have felt that same exact way of feeling nostalgic for an alternative reality that isn't happening.
So, I guess what you're saying is if someone really wants to know the professional viewpoint on this, they could read Carl Rogers.
Right. And if they want to hear the Kurt and Lydia version, then keep listening.
Yeah, the unstudied, off the cuff, Kurt and Lydia. I get it. We talked about in previous episodes things like how to build an ideal life or how to build a life, how to make a life. We talked about if you sat down and really did some soul searching and wrote down what you wanted your ideal life to be like, then you could probably come up with some parameters and some goals that could help you to move in that direction. Not that you can ever accomplish an ideal, right? Ideals are
Mm,
usually things that can't be accomplished, but they are things that can be pursued and then we improve. But then you've kind of put a little twist on that, Lydia, because you're not talking about the ideal life. You're talking about your ideal person.
yeah, it's pretty straight into the core.
Yeah, it really is. So whenever you start talking about an ideal, when it comes to a person, ideals mean the best, the perfect, right? And
Mm,
it's a panacea that can never be reached because
right.
humans aren't ideal. We're real instead. We're messy and we pursue things, we make mistakes, we goof up, we succeed, we win, we have joys and sorrows, we have times that we are foolish and times that we're incredibly wise, and we're just too messy to be an ideal. But you know what? I kind of suspect that in there somewhere, an ideal or something approaching ideal can begin to surface. But I guess I wanted to make the distinction. We're not talking about the ideal life anymore. Now we're talking about the ideal person. And that's why I said this is going to get kind of introspective.
Right. Yep, absolutely. So, in order to kind of explain this, I'm going to take my hood off now so you guys can actually see my face. But
The
um
hooded Lydia.
I was
Lydia
reminding
in the
myself of
hood.
that Kermit the Frog meme. Some of our listeners, I'm sure, have seen that before, but it's just like me just thinking about life, having a normal, great time. And then the next slide is like existential crisis. So
Yeah,
that's
we
what
don't
it's
want to
reminding
create
me of.
any existential crises today. We want to flesh some of this out though, because this is a real deal, right?
Right. Yep, absolutely.
You go.
In order to kind of give you guys a little bit of a mental image of what we're talking about here, you can imagine a Venn diagram, which is, those two overlapping circles with two different concepts that are different, but then they overlap in a small area. So that's kind of what we're talking about here is in one circle you have the real self or the self image, and then in the other circle you have the ideal self, and then those two circles can overlap a little bit. But the issue that a lot of people have is when the real self and the ideal self part ways so that there's not a lot of overlap. And
Mm.
that's what causes a lot of cognitive dissonance and a lot of um, issues when people get a lot of negative emotions and negative thoughts towards themselves because their real image isn't lining up with their ideal image. So, how does it impact an individual when the real self and the ideal self are mostly in alignment? When those two Venn diagram circles are slowly overlapping a little bit more.
You know, I think the results of that are a real sense of authenticity, which is very empowering, very honest, sometimes raw,
Hmm.
but I also believe it can give people huge confidence. And one of the reasons I say that is because whenever you have a facade, which is another word psychologists use to describe, pretending to be something that you're not really. So
Right.
pretending to be an ideal that you actually aren't, right? That dissonance you were talking about. When you have a facade, it feels dishonest in your gut. It feels
Hmm.
it feels negative. It pulls you down. It takes power out of your soul. Maybe I'm overemphasizing that, but I'm not sure I am.
Right.
But when you are living your real authentic self, you're not pretending. You're being who you are for the whole world to see. And if you are able to do that and feel comfortable in it, then wow, how empowering that is.
Mm.
So I think that it's authentic people are loved. And I think they are like magnets because when people see that authenticity, they want it. They don't want to pretend, they don't want to fake it. They're like, that guy, that gal, wow. I met a young lady a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I don't remember, but she was a young adult. And I had heard about her before, but never met her. But when I met her, it took me about 3 seconds to realize that the lady I was talking to had nothing to do with the lady that was standing in that room.
Wow.
It was just immediately apparent that she was on the stage and her real self was somewhere else. And I only
Mm.
bring that up as a contrast to this. I think that
Right.
people are going to relate to this continuum a little bit. You have the really authentic person who's just like, I am what you see is what you get, and I'm okay with that. Forgive me if you don't like it. You have the real person versus the one who walks into the room and you're like, where are you? Because you're not here.
Right.
Now, I'm
Yeah.
talking about the perspective of when you see someone that's authentic. Now let's kind of reverse it, personalize it. What does it feel like to be fake versus authentic? And that's not really what we're talking about, but it kind of is because we have this ideal self and then this real self. We can feel like the ideal self isn't who we really are yet. And I use the word yet because hopefully we're pursuing growing, right?
Right. Hmm.
So you feel like you're pretending to be this ideal when you're not really, then that's going to feel fake. So
Right.
whenever we're talking about making life better, living a life full of joy and reward and pursuit of great things, then authenticity is really important. But we still want to have these ideal goals that we're pursuing. So Lydia, what do you think about that? How can we pursue better ideals without being fake?
It really starts with taking a good hard look at what your real self is like. The raw, unfiltered version of you that I was talking about. That's crucial to be able to offer your authentic self because you can look in the mirror and instead of being blinded by the ideal self that you're trying to present, which is exhausting and doesn't last, you're actually able to say, okay, here's who I actually am. And I really don't like these parts of myself. And I really do like these parts of myself. And I am actively choosing to, instead of blind myself and others by adopting the facade of the ideal self, I'm going to actually authentically work on myself to start to become more like my ideal self by getting rid of some of the really dark parts of my personality because we all have those areas that we struggle with that aren't serving us, they're not serving other people, they're not bringing light and love into the world. And so a lot of it is just actively choosing to see those parts of yourself for what they are and pursuing the ideal version of yourself. And it's a lifelong process. It's not something that you all of a sudden can change in a day or a week or a month or 10 years. It's an ongoing process where you're just getting better and better and better and you're trying more and more to get closer to that ideal version of you so that you can really be able to love on yourself and love other people and do what you were put on this earth to do because each of us have a really unique job, a really unique position in this world. And in order to do that, I think that we need to um, really be honest with ourselves and try to pursue that ideal version, but not have an artificial version of it. It has to be authentic in order for this to work.
I think true authenticity is when you forget about yourself entirely.
Mm,
Meaning, you're at the party, you're in the crowd, maybe it's a peer group where you're not really comfortable yet because you don't know them super well. You're trying to find out who's who and they're evaluating you, and we all do it. It's the way it works. And you're so authentic that you're not worried about yourself at all. What was it? See if you can remember this, Lydia. What was it I used to tell you about being in a group and worrying about yourself?
I still think about this all the time. It's helped me so much. And it's just that don't worry about yourself, what you're doing, what you look like, how you're presenting yourself to other people, because they are all worrying about that too.
They're worried
they're
about
not
themselves.
they're not paying attention to you. They're paying attention to themselves and how they're trying to present themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a funny thing, but it's really, really normal for people in a crowd to say, "Oh, am I acting the way that I ought to? Am I behaving correctly?" That kind of self-doubt and that makes you less and less authentic. Um, I think a shorthand way of saying it is don't worry about what other people are thinking about you because they're not. They're thinking about themselves. And so what is so rich is when you can get out of yourself and be truly authentic with others
Mm,
and
yeah.
care about who they are And that makes them love you all the more because they're like, whoa, she's being real with me. It's very disarming, but it also shows that you value the others. And so, on the one hand, we're talking about this is a worthwhile pursuit to really get into how to become what you want to be, working toward that, being more authentic, being less fake, the ideal self, blah, 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 really kind of introspective. And then on the other hand, I'm saying, but you got to get out of your own head and not
Mm,
worry about this. You got to be others focused to be authentic. So there's a crazy balance there. I know, and it's a skill that's something I think you learn by practice, repetitive practice. I'm not sure it's something that comes real easily to people. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to be like this now," right? But I think it starts with when you're doing your personal enrichment time, then that's when you can really kind of get introspective and measure these things. But when
right.
you're in the group setting, that's when you need to not worry about what other people are thinking about you because they're not thinking about you.
Yeah.
Right? That's when you can get out of your own head and just be others focused. It takes a balance. It really does. You know, I just found a quote or not a quote, but it's more of a commentary on what Carl Rogers had to say about this a little bit. And I think it aligns so well with some of the things that we've said in previous episodes. One of the main themes that we have, the first main theme is love is the most important thing. It's loving others, loving yourself. Love is so powerful. But the
Right.
second theme that I just keep coming back to, Lydia, is that humans are very valuable by the nature of that they're human and they have such wonderful potential. No one's perfect, but we can all be
Mm,
forgiven. And we have such amazing potential for good and such life-giving opportunity. And that makes you so valuable. So let's see what Rogers had to say about that. Rogers believed that if patients felt valued, cared for, and respected, they would begin to grapple with their problems and make changes that led them to become more fully who they felt they really were. They would become empowered to take more responsibility for their feelings and their lives. So Rogers believed it started with the client feeling valued, cared for, and respected.
mm,
That goes along with Maslow's hierarchy again, right?
right.
um, some of the foundational basic needs being satisfied so you can move on up the self actualization hierarchy. But oh my word, when you look in the mirror, and when I say you, I don't mean Lydia, I mean all of us, everyone watching
Hmm.
and listening and you and me, you look in the mirror. I know you've done this once or twice, but I challenge everyone to do it. Look in the mirror. And instead of looking at whether your mascara is right or what that speck is on your lip or, if your hair is good, look at your own eyes. Look deep into your own soul and stare at your own self through your eyes and say, "Oh, who's in there?"
Right.
This is a very disturbing thing. Some people call it staring into the abyss because it's not that your soul is an abyss, but more that when we kind of go deep from time to time, we don't always like what we see. And people try to name us. They try to say, you are this, you are that. And I think that what happens is that we begin to think of ourselves the way that other people say that we should. And it could be any authority figure or a friend or peer or someone we respect or even someone we don't respect, a bully. But they put labels on us and name us, and we can begin to believe those things. And you look in that mirror and into your own eyes and you go deep. And wow, so many emotions come up. If you just look yourself in the face, in the eyes, and say, I'm going to be honest with you, that's
Mm,
that's hard. But the more authentic you are, I think the easier it gets. Not that it's ever easy, but you can list all of your failings and all of your successes, the things you love about yourself and the things that you're embarrassed about, frankly. You can put it all there and look at that person and say, I forgive you and I love you for who you are. It's not about being worthy of it. It's about you're someone worth caring for. And I'm going to care for you. Speaking of yourself, I'm going to care for you and be real.
Mm, yeah, I love that. I was kind of thinking as you were talking about that, um, Carla Rogers mentioned something called self actualization, and that was essentially when the real self and the ideal self were completely congruent, and in that theoretical alignment that he was talking about, um that's when self actualization occurs, and it's pretty cool. It's he described it as the epitome of reaching human beingness.
Wow.
Which is when your real self and your ideal self are fully aligned, and you're not feeling any of that dissonance within you of, who you are versus who you want to be. And even though we'll never get there to that point, and Rogers even said that himself, that it's impossible to get to that point, but the joy and the the real meat of the issue is just with the lifelong pursuit of that, and
Mm,
being able to, like you were saying, look in the mirror, see yourself for who you are, and have love for all parts of yourself. And then, even have love for the parts that you don't agree with, and just say, you know what, you're probably dark. That part is dark for a reason. Maybe it was trauma, maybe it was, something else that was going on in your life, a lot of pain that's kind of acting out in a not so great way. And you can say, you know what, I understand why this is happening. I understand why these parts are kind of acting out, and I'm going to love you anyway. And we're going to get through this, and we're going to be better. And we're also going to have a lot of grace whenever we relapse and make that mistake again.
a wise man named Stuart once told me that if you want to forgive somebody, you have to list the infractions. You actually have to say, this is what's wrong. That's what I have to forgive. In other words, you have to be specific. And so when you're looking in that mirror and you see that dark place that Lydia was talking about, you have to say it out loud sometimes. I am really ashamed that this is a part of me. It's a memory, it's a feeling, it's an action that I don't like. And just voice it. Say, I don't like that. But neither am I stuck there. I don't have to be that. And I'm going to forgive myself for screwing up. I forgive X, Y, Z.
Yep. And then when it happens again, because that's how humans are
Mm-hmm.
hardwired, then you do it all over again.
Yep. But one thing I'd like to say, pursuing the ideal self is so much more effective than just trying to fix the broken self. And the reason I say that is we migrate toward what we focus on. So if we focus on all of our sins, quote unquote, all of our failings where we miss the mark, if we focus on that, we tend to drift even more toward that. And that's not really the way to thrive. So instead, we outline them, we speak them out loud, and we forgive them, and then we say, now what do I want to be? And you choose something. Let's just make it very, very simple. Um, this is dumb, but let's be dumb for a minute. Let's say that you have bad breath all the time. And you're
Okay.
like, oh, I don't like that about myself. Now we're talking about soul stuff here, but bad breath all the time. So if all you do is say, oh, I wish I didn't have bad breath, I got to make sure I don't have bad breath. Boy, I have bad breath. I don't know what, that all you do is think about your bad breath. And then you can't feel comfortable in a conversation with anybody because you want to go like this. I have bad breath. But you can just brush your teeth and use mouthwash and drink a lot of water and pursue healthy things. And then your bad breath becomes a non issue. And then it's like, oh, I'm doing great things and it works. And you can proceed forward with confidence. That's a very silly example, but I think that that's the way it works, even with the big serious stuff.
Mm,
Is
yeah.
That's why we have the idea of an ideal, right? Is that, oh, I can move towards something great. And another aspect of this, which I think is really, really critical, is the ideal can be very far away and not achievable. So we need maybe the ideal as the pursuit, but we have to have intermediate steps that we can celebrate, right? Like you get up in the morning and you brush your teeth and you're like, oh, wow, I'm going to celebrate the fact that I have fresh breath. That's just one thing. But no, the reality is that we can celebrate smaller achievements along the way. And the only way to accomplish great things is a little bit at a time. So in this exercise, you look yourself in the face, you look deep into your own eyes, you see all the stuff you don't like, but you also see stuff you do like, and you have an idea of where you want to go. Well, every time you move in a positive direction, then celebrate it. Even if it's just a moment to glance in the mirror and say, you got this. Yeah. You know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
focus on what you are becoming instead of on what you have been that you really don't like. Focus on what you're becoming. But so here's the question, though, that keeps coming back in my mind. We're focused on what we're becoming. Does that mean we're pretending? Or are we being authentic?
Hmm. You know, it's kind of dealing with that part of the human psyche that lives outside of time and space. Um, and I think that you can focus on what you're becoming while still being fully in the present, because the present and what you're becoming were both the same thing at one point, right? It's just
Well, beyond the
their
scope of time. Yeah.
their their timing is off. You're just adding another variable of time in there. So
That's an interesting way to think of it.
yeah, that's that's how I think of it. It's not necessarily that you're pursuing the end of the rainbow that keeps moving. It's just that you're experiencing now in the present what you are becoming in the future. But it's again, it's that part of the human psyche that lives outside of time, which is how we can do both.
I like that. I think of it, it's similar. I use the word potential, but instead of thinking of potential as something that is not, I think of potential as something that's in me. It's the spark that's going to be a flame, but it's already a part of me because I want it to be. I know it's good and valuable and healthy, and I want it to be. And I know that spark lives in me, and I'm going to become it more and more and more. So, because of that potential, that really is who I am. I'm just learning how to put those clothes on.
Right. Yep, absolutely. I did want
So,
to read Carl Rogers' um kind of summary on all of this because I thought that it was so incredible. This was kind of his summary of what self-actualization looks like for the fully functioning person as he described them. The first thing is that they're really open to experience. Both positive and negative emotions are accepted. And then
wow.
the negative feelings aren't just denied, but they're worked through rather than resorting to ego defense mechanisms. The second one is existential existential living, when you're in touch with different experiences as they occur in life, avoiding prejudging and preconceptions, being able to live and fully appreciate the present, not always looking back to the past or the forward to the future. You're just living in the moment. The third thing is you're able to trust your feelings, the feelings, instincts, and gut reactions that are paid attention to and trusted. People's own decisions are the right ones, and we should trust ourselves to make the right choices. The fourth one is creativity. Creative thinking and risk taking are features of a person's life. A person does not play safe all the time. This involves the ability to adjust and change and seek new experiences. And number five, and the last one, is the fulfilled life. A person is happy and satisfied with life and is always looking for new challenges and experiences.
Mm.
So Rogers kind of, um, gave us the disclaimer at the beginning that those are things that are impossible for all of us to achieve all the time. But there are a lot of things within there, within those five things that he mentioned, that we can begin to adopt into our lives a little bit more in various increments, and we can get closer to having that fully functioning person with all five of those aspects. And as we're pursuing those things while also celebrating how far we've come, I believe that that can add just an incredible amount of joy and self efficacy that's so important to be able to live well in this life.
Ooh, that's beautiful. And while we were talking today, I thought of something that I hadn't really realized, that the term self-actualization has been volleyed back and forth for decades and decades and decades. And people always say self-actualization. What does that mean? That means somehow I'm what I want to be or something, and
Mm,
but think about the word actual. What is actual? That means authentic, real. The actualization is the becoming the real,
right. Yep.
becoming the honest. Can we say that?
Mm-hmm.
Being honest with yourself and honest with others, becoming the honest, real person. That's self actualization. And it leads to all those amazing outcomes, the five things that you just listed. Those are both outcomes and pathways,
Mm.
right? So, anyway, that's awesome. Thanks, Lyd. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did want to mention too that, regardless of whether or not you find yourself being more left brained or right brained, there's creativity in math. There's a
Sure.
lot of creativity in math and logic. Um, so we're not necessarily talking about art and music per se, although those are wonderful things. It's just creativity in all areas of life. It's your synapses firing in your brain and making new pathways that your brain before hadn't made.
Hmm. Interesting. Even and the creativity, creating new, something new. We create things because it bursts up inside of us, because we are made to love. We're made for beauty. We're made for
Mm-hmm.
problem solving, and we're made for innovative ideas and initiative and industriousness. That's what creativity is, and it can express itself in so many different ways. But I think it's because at our root, we want we want to make the world a better place.
Right.
And
Yep. Absolutely.
it starts with us, right? It starts with us. So I would like to encourage everyone. We'll wrap this up. I think this is a good place to kind of take a pause and start a new episode for another day. But I want to wrap this up by saying that if you find yourself worrying about whether you're being authentic, what your ideal self is, and what your perception of your real self is, um, everybody has those feelings. That's the first thing. You're not alone. The second thing is, if you're going to choose to be honest with yourself and you do the mirror exercise where you look into your own eyes, then you must list all the things you like about yourself. And don't be fake about it. Be real. Be very honest. And you might have to start small, but with practice you'll get better at it. But really look at what you see that you like and what your potential is and who you are becoming. And don't get down about it. You got to get
Mm.
out of your own head a little bit. You don't want to slip into despair and say, I'll never be good enough. That's true. You'll never be good enough. So get over that one. Instead, say, I can be forgiving enough. I can be loving enough. And I can be real enough. And that will
Absolutely.
move you in the right direction. So
Yep.
it's a scary thing to take on what Lydia and I have been discussing today. And there's a time and a place for everything. This is not something that should always be where you are in your head, right? Right here. You can't live there all the time. Live there when it's appropriate. Take a few minutes every other day or so and kind of do a checkup from the neck up, as Zig Ziglar used to say, right? But you got to reach out to others and make the world a better place for others. And I think that you will find real authenticity in that. So,
Mm. Yep, absolutely. Well, you guys, we love you so much. Thank you
yep,
for listening in, and hopefully we give you some food for thought, maybe some new ideas, and feel free to reach out and whether it be in the comment section or emailing us and just tell us what your thoughts are on this episode and maybe give us some things that we didn't consider. Give us some food for thought too. We'd love it.
sure. Yep. We love you guys. See you next time.